You might not realize we're at war until you meet this man. Welcome to the Rob Lett Show. I'm your host, Rob Lett. Some of the best things in life are the things that you didn't plan. They just sort of happened naturally. I never had plans to interview anyone on my channel. The opportunity just sort of fell into my lap. Since all of this happened at once, I needed to carve out a special place for all of the interviews I've been doing. I'm calling this playlist The Spotlight, where I interview people who you may or may not know, but they're playing a critical role in the advancement of conservative culture. So you may want to look them up. Today on The Spotlight, we have Trevor Loudon. Trevor is a conservative speaker and activist from New Zealand. He's also an author, a columnist for the Epoch Times, as well as a successful movie producer. I only had a few minutes to sit down with Trevor to discuss the current culture war and why it's not enough to just be a conservative today. But before we get started, I'd like you to go ahead and do a few things. First of all, like this video, subscribe to it. If you're on YouTube, to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a bell. That's a notifications bell. Click it, and it'll notify you the next time we release a new show. If you're on Rumble, though, to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a share button. Click it, and it'll share this video with a friend of yours who should have been here with us today. Go ahead and do all of those things that apply right now. Welcome to the Rob Lett Show. I'm your host, Rob Lett. And today I am at the Georgia Unite conference with Trevor Loudon. He is from New Zealand. He's an activist. He's a political commentator. He's an author. He's a movie producer. Welcome, Trevor Loudon. How are you, sir?
Thanks so much, Rob. Great to be on.
Awesome. So you just got finished speaking. How did that go?
Yep. Well, I thought it went pretty well. I was a little bit rusty, but the audience responded very well. I think I got some powerful messages across. Awesome. So I saw you're from Christchurch, New Zealand, and I believe you made a joke that I guess you were born into socialism, but you converted to conservatism later. Well, yeah. Look. We imbibe socialism with our mother's milk in New Zealand. You know, when I grew up, we had benefits for this and benefits for that, and free this and free that, and we were told we were the world leaders of the welfare state, and we should be very proud of that. And I grew up believing that, and but I didn't have to pay the 66% taxation or anything like that. And it was only really in my late teens that I discovered through a free market economics teacher I had, probably the only one in New Zealand, and through certain books I got, like Friedrich Hayek and Bastiat and others, I discovered free markets, and then I discovered anti-communism, because what I am primarily is an anti-communist. It's not enough just to be a conservative. You have to be an active anti-communist, because communism is the major force in our land today that is working to destroy the freedoms that we have.
Yeah, that is definite. I'll confess that when Dr. Babbage told me, that she invited me to interview several speakers here, and I'll confess that when she had mentioned your name, I wasn't familiar with your work at the time. And so in preparation for our interview, when I started watching your videos, I think yours was probably the one I was the most impressed with, because you and I we're right here. We're on the same vein that there is such a thing as good and evil.
Yep.
I watched this. It's going to sound like it's not related at all, but I was watching this video. It was about metaphysics, and the gentleman was talking about the brain, and he says the brain can notice things, but we can't really see those things unless we have a word to describe it. And the analogy that he was using is this room, for instance. He was saying, right now we're sitting in a room, we just acknowledge we're in a room, but he says a painter, an electrician, a painter, an electrician, and a plumber can walk into the same room and see it differently because of the body of knowledge that they have.
Yeah.
An electrician will come in here and they'll say, hey, the reason why you have these lights is because behind this sheetrock, are some studs and electrical wires, etc. And the plumber and the painter will see it all differently. I mention all that because one of the things that we're starting to see in society now is the Democrat Party believes in 72 genders. I think the last statistic that I saw is that 1 out of 5 Democrats actually believe men can be pregnant. We're seeing men being put in prisons with women. And from some of the interviews that I saw, you said, hey, it's not enough for us to start thinking now that all of these things just happen to be crazy happenstance. They're all rooted in this thing called Marxism.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Because I study Marxism, I study the communist parties. I read their literature. I read their magazines. I watch their movies. I really deeply dive into it. So when I look at movements, most Americans would look at the LGBTQ movement, say this is crazy stuff. They look at the open borders movement. They say this is just lunacy. They look at Biden turning over Afghanistan to China and say, what a disaster, what a stupid thing. They look at, these stupid policies coming out of the administration who are ending our energy independence, who are indoctrinating kids in schools. We look at all these negative phenomena. We don't realize there is a common thread. They are all manifestations of the Marxist movement. We're in a revolution. We're in a communist revolution to take down America, the last remaining bastion against the world socialist state. So all of these attacks, the attacks on our families, the attacks on our churches, the attacks on our middle class, on private businesses, on just sanity, attacks on men, masculinity, these are all Marxist. And they're all designed to create so much chaos that there is a revolution and a new society can be brought forward, a tyrannical Marxist society. So this is because I have that knowledge, I'm the electrician who walks into the room, and because I understand wiring, I can make connections. That's my talent. And so I can look at all these different disparate movements and tell you the underlying Marxist basis. And that's what I do in my movies. That's what I do in my books and interviews. And sometimes you can see your neighbor's situation more clearly than your own. So sometimes I can see what's happening in America from a different perspective than what Americans themselves can.
I didn't realize how much. Growing up, all we've heard in the United States is everything was about Russia in the United States. But one of the things that you alluded to in some of your interviews is that, this isn't about just Russia anymore. China is playing a huge role in terms of how it impacts Hollywood, the movies that we watch, and everything, right? Whenever I'm getting into conversations with Democrats, one of the things that I can't believe it's 2022, and I still have people who still believe in this party switch. But I have on my channel this video. It's one of the most popular videos we have on the channel. It's called Rise of the Black Conservative. And in that particular episode, I take people all the way back to February 1939. And I remind them that we actually had a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden in New York. Yeah. The United States, we always seem to act like, socialism, that was something that happened over in Germany, or Nazism was something over there, but it happened actually here in the United States. But when I watched your video, you mentioned, hey, it existed way before 1939. You went all the way back to 1922 and talked about something called the Bolshevik Revolution.
Yeah, well, there had been the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia where Lenin and 2,000 Bolsheviks took over a country of 140 million people. That organized. And so, but we don't know that in America 1921, 1922, we almost had a similar revolution here. We had massive strikes, we had bombings, we had sabotage, railway lines were sabotaged. There was a group of people in this country trying to bring this country into complete chaos to bring about a revolution. And the young J. Edgar Hoover and the Attorney General at the time, they mounted a thing called the Palmer Raids. They raided Communist Party headquarters all over the country, and they deported 6,000 foreign communists back to Russia, where they were greeted by Vladimir Lenin. There were 6,000 foreign agitators in this country trying to bring this country to its knees, and that has never stopped. We'd have way more than 6,000 here right now trying to do the same thing. We've got 25,000 Chinese spies alone in this country, operating in every state, corrupting our businessmen, buying up our land, stealing our secrets, killing our kids with their fentanyl. This is still an ongoing problem, and they're actually more close to bringing this country to its knees now than they were back in the 1920s.
It's actually very scary. When I talked about this party switch thing that I still hear people talking about, one of the things that I mentioned in one of my shows about there was no party switch, there's another show called There Was No Party Switch, is I tell people, look, I know you've had these debates with Democrats before and they've taken you down this rabbit hole about why there was a party switch, but honestly, everything changed, I noticed, in 2016. And what changed in 2016 is this knucklehead named Bernie Sanders came out and admitted that he was a socialist. Yeah. And ever since he admitted he was a socialist, AOC admitted she was a socialist, Beto O'Rourke, Andrew Gillum, I mean, it just went on. And there's no denying it anymore. They were socialists in the past and we're socialists now, and it amazes me that people actually will vote for this. And so it's really important for people to grasp this close to election. How important is it for the United States to remain free?
Look, absolutely important for your own sake, your children's sake, but for New Zealand, for Australia, for France, for South Africa, for India, for every country, because if freedom is lost here, it will be lost everywhere. The totalitarians will completely take over. You name a country that can stand against China if America isn't there with it. You tell me one. The freedom will be gone forever on this planet if we don't wake up pretty darn quickly. I challenge anybody. So you're a Democrat, right? And you're a patriot, you're a veteran, you're a hunter, you're a great guy, but you still think you're voting for Harry Truman. You still think you're voting for JFK. You do not understand your political party has been hijacked by hardcore revolutionary Marxists. The 60s generation who supported the Viet Cong, in the Vietnam War, who supported Fidel Castro, supported the Sandinistas, supported the Soviet Union, they are now running the Democratic Party. They're running Hollywood. They're running a lot of your corporations, a lot of your churches. And they've infiltrated the Republicans to some degree as well. And so they want their revolution before they die. We are on the verge of socialist revolution in this country. And if we go down that road, we will never get it back. Never.
It's amazing that you're from New Zealand. I spoke with Katie Hopkins earlier. She's from Britain. And I know when I watched one of your interviews before, you were talking about some of the most influential people. You mentioned Trump and you mentioned Jordan Peterson, and he's from Canada.
Yeah.
And I think of Dinesh D'Souza. I think of so many people who aren't from here who are so passionate about the United States and freedom. And it's just frustrating to see that we got our own Americans. I guess it's because they're so used to not running from anything. They're so used to everyone running to us. It's so discouraging to see that these people don't get it, but everyone else does.
Look, when you live in the freest, richest country the world has ever known, that's wonderful. But you lose connection with what evil is. You lose connection. You think you're always going to be safe. You don't. You're like a house. You're like you've got this great house. But one day you lean on the door jamb and it collapses because the termites have been burrowing away for the last 30 years and you didn't know. Well, see, in foreign countries, we all look to America as the leader for liberty. I come from a country that was saved from an invasion by the Japanese army in World War II by your fathers and grandfathers and uncles. I wouldn't be here without America. We all know that if America goes down, it's over. China will have my country in a heartbeat. China will have Australia. Russia will just take over Europe. Iran will take over the Middle East. North Korea will go crazy. We're on the verge of a major global war and major world revolution, and the only thing that's stopping it happening is America. So America has to get back to the Constitution. It has to kick the communists out of power and resume that benevolent world leadership that it's always shown. We are grateful to America. Not everybody hates America. You got college kids in America who hate America. Well, college kids in New Zealand hate America. College kids in France hate America. But the basic citizen, the basic businessman, the just ordinary Joe in all these countries, they love America. They want their country to be like America. We're all rooting for you here because we know that our survival is intimately linked to your survival.
That was awesome. I mentioned earlier, first of all, I want to thank you. I mentioned earlier that you also produce movies. I was at a rally for the governor here, Governor Brian Kemp, and in the middle of that rally, there was a time when they passed the microphone around and they let people ask them questions, and there was a gentleman who stood up and he said he was a Democrat. But even though he was a Democrat, he says, I'm here to support Governor Kemp, he says, because you've always kept your word on everything that you've done. He says, I've been tracking and paying attention. He says, I want to thank your wife, Marty. He says about her stance on human trafficking. But the thing that he said that resonated with me the most is he says, I think you guys are great. And he says, I just think you're awful about promoting what you do. And part of the reason I'm so honored to sit down and talk with you, because I know you're not just the activist and speaker, but you've also produced film, correct?
Yeah, Enemies Within the Church is our most recent one. Enemies Within dealt with the Marxists and Islamists in your Congress and your Senate, and including the background of Joe Biden, who is a rampant Marxist. And though most people wouldn't know that, the Enemies Within the Church is the woke church, how the Marxists have infiltrated the churches and are turning them against America as well.
Okay. So great. So that's a perfect segue into, I guess, including everything here. So is that your most recent project? Tell them, everyone, your most recent projects and how they can find you. Trevor.
Yeah, well, you go to trevorloudon.com, but Loudon is Loudon, but don't Google that because sometimes Google forgets my IP address. So put it in the search bar at the top of the page. You can order Enemies Within the Church, Enemies Within. My latest book is just coming out this week called Security Risk Senators, where I give the Marxist backgrounds in part 1 and part 2 of 30 current US senators, including both of the senators from Georgia, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, deep Marxists, both of them. And or you can go directly to enemieswithinthechurch.com and stream the movie there or order a hard copy if you wish.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I was definitely honored to meet you, Trevor.
Oh, it's great to meet you, sir.
You have a great one.
Excellent, Rob.
I hope you liked my brief discussion with Trevor Loudon. Be sure to comment below. Tell me what you thought, who you'd like to see, and why. I'll do my best to put a spotlight on the people who are fighting for you. Cheers to your freedom.